Welcome, everyone, today to a special edition of Stand Alone, where we really make a decision to start leading our life. Instead of just letting life happen to us, we can take control, we can lead it, and we can move from being ordinary and just like everyone else to being extraordinary. And so I want to bring you guests that can help to facilitate that. Start for us to really start looking at how we think. And I can't think of a better guest than Josh Cadillac. So Josh is in the real estate arena. I know you do work with investments and crypto and real estate, but for a lot of us, what we're really talking about is similar things because it comes down to our ability to close ourselves and then others, to have an influence and an impact. And today, Josh, I just wanted to really zone in on what is the art of closing. And we can dive into this and how we need to really work on this craft now more than ever, because we have to be getting better. We have to be bringing an edge. So if you can share with us, a little bit of your background, what brought you into the real estate market to begin with? Were you a little boy always dreaming about doing this? Or was there a circumstance that propelled you to do this? And then the next level is what made you make a decision to become the best at it instead of just being mediocre and like everyone else? So welcome, Josh, if you can kick that off for us and we can talk about just getting to know you better so that we can learn today.
Sure. Good stuff. Thank you, Sabrina, so much for having me. Two big questions. I guess the short version of what went on was I was holding a lot of real estate come when 2008 hit. And in addition, I had the brilliant idea to go into the restaurant business at the same time. So that was the ultimate in double whammies when you have a recession and a real estate market that tanked. And I was overextended in the restaurants. The restaurants were starting to do well, and then they stopped doing well all at the same time. So that wound up being a perfect storm of bad. And so I realized I had to basically pull myself up by my bootstraps and get back after it because I was, there's a technical term for what I was. It's called broke. I was broke. I had basically,
but not broken.
No. You got to get up and you got to make hay while the sun shines. And so there was never a point where, there wasn't something that needed to get done. And we just needed to figure out what it is that needs to get done. So I needed to work on me and get me to be the guy I needed me to be to do what needed doing. And so I went to real estate just because I had owned a lot of real estate in my life. My father was a major land owner in New York. He was one of the largest landowners in Brooklyn for a lot of years. I had a lot of industrial property up there, which he had sold over the years. And so real estate just seemed to be a natural place to fall into. And when I started in real estate, I knew that I needed to take and get back what I had lost. So I was hungry to go after it. And it became clear to me early on, and it was hard for me to put my finger on, but I could see there was something wrong with how sales was done in real estate. And in real estate, it's a weird product. Like if you're selling insurance, you go tell people what's good about the policies you have. In real estate, if there's one thing we never talk about, it's the actual product. You really want to blow your own mind? Try to think back to the last time you heard a real estate ad tell you what's good about owning real estate. They'll tell you about their brokerage. They'll tell you about the agent. They'll show you just listed, just sold. But actually knowing the product that you sell and knowing it in depth, making it like, hey, why would I want this? No, it's not something that's not part of culture. It's not part of how real estate is done. So I knew that was a problem. And I bolstered that situation as quickly as I could. I pursued basically every piece of real estate education I could in the first 2 years. I have stuff that most people that have been in the business 40 years don't have as far as education stuff. I wanted to make sure, one, that I didn't drop the ball for anybody because my customers are my lifeblood. And I've always felt that from the beginning. But And I kind of have an ethical responsibility myself to them that even if I won't do it for myself, I owe it to them to give them the protection and the knowledge that they need so that they don't make a mistake. It's not just my money anymore. Now it's their money. And so I think to answer your question, really, Sabrina, where I call it the brain damage came that makes me do it the way that I do is when I was a little boy, my father, I was staying with my father and some kid was a bunch of kids with their parents standing around. My kid's going to go be a doctor. Mine's going to be a lawyer. My father looks at me and he says, look, I don't care if you grow up to be a floor sweeper. You just be the best damn floor sweeper there is. When you sweep that floor, I don't care who owns it. That's your floor. The way you sweep that floor is a reflection of you and the standards you have for you and the life you live and the standards by which you will live. And you never forget that. And I remember being a teenager years later and seeing my father, who was an old man at the time, seeing me sweep a floor one day. Now, this is a guy that had, I mean, you know, the most interesting man in the world, the Dos Equis guy, he's got nothing on my dad. All right. My father had patents. He was in the nuclear weapons program in the military. He just did all kinds of, he had this like really amazing life. And this old man that had seen it all, had 1,000 employees, comes and takes that broom out of my hand and shows me how to sweep a floor because he couldn't stand to see a floor not swept well. Everything in his business, it didn't matter what it was. It had to be done well because for him, it was a reflection of him and who he was as a person. And for me, Sabrina, when I look at sales, that's the thing we've lost. Most people do work to afford to do life. My father did work because it was part of his life. And there was going to be no part of his life he would accept that wasn't going to be pursued with excellence, whether it was his personal life, whether it was a good meal, whether it was a trip, or whether it was just going to work. He did great stuff in everything because you know what? That gave him a fulfilled life. It gave him a life he could be proud of. And that whole idea that I have of close for life, that's really what it is. I don't just close customers for life because it builds a business, because that's really what we have to do. But it builds for me the kind of business I can be proud of and have as an asset in my life, if that makes sense.
It makes so much sense to me. And it is so refreshing to hear someone say this, because this is something that I grapple a lot with in the sales industry. And I don't share this with a lot of people because sales becomes this machine that it's like, do as much as you can, as fast as you can. And I have a science brain, so I'm trained to look at everything in a detailed fashion. And when I got into sales, they would be like, don't be so detailed. And I'm like, but wait, it's the details that matter. It's how we do our work that really matters. And I truly believe, Josh, that this is what the customers are buying from us, like how we show up, how we do our work, the attention we put into the work that we do. So I applaud you for saying that, because it's the truth, and that's why a lot of businesses don't last. They go into the business, they're fast, they're heavy up front, and then they lose their wind. They have a little glitch in the system or a little dip, and, they really just can't sustain. So I love that. You talk about closing customers for life. And, you mentioned this previously when you were talking, that it becomes something that you feed into because it feeds back to you. But where did this initially stem from? Just this idea? Because for me in our business, with life insurance, they have to be our customers for life. So that's just naturally intuitive that we have to sell a different kind of way. How did you come to terms with that idea when you could be transactional? It could be very logical for you to just say, like, listen, let me get this deal, do whatever it takes to get this deal, and then go on to the next one. What made you come to that place of understanding how important it is to build a customer for life?
Well, I think there's one kind of one big picture thing and one kind of maybe self flaw that brought it to be. So the big picture thing for me is I'm originally from New York, right? And in New York, if you need a plumber and somebody knows a good plumber, they always say the same thing. I got a guy. You got to use my guy. So the question the logical question to me is, how do I become that person in real estate? Like, oh, you're going to do it. You got to use Jot. You got to go to, no, you got to use my guy. Right. And so how do you get to that place in people's mind, where it's not like they don't want to give anybody the option because they know you're going to make them look so good for them referring you. So that's one piece of it. And the other piece of it, Sabrina, is I genuinely hate spending money for advertising. I hate making advertising pieces. My advertising budget for the last 8 years has been nothing. I don't spend any money on advertising. All of my business comes from closed business and the business those people refer. Because I say this, and I would imagine it in in insurance, and I can ask you the question, there's a lot of tasks in the insurance business to do. I mean, a lot of follow-ups, there's marketing, there's all kinds of tasks. And so I ask people, because in a sales business, there's always this problem. And I think it's maybe more so in real estate, but maybe not. I don't know the insurance business well enough, so I have to ask you if the correlation exists. We have a lot of these tasks that exist, right? And so we have to recognize something first and foremost. We have good news and bad news. The good news is we're the CEO of our own corporation. Yay, I'm in charge. Who's the CEO? I'm the CEO. Doesn't get better than that. But the bad news is, guess who the staff of the corporation is? It's me too. I have to do all the tasks no matter what. And so here's the problem with that. When we look at the tasks that exist in sales, almost all of them, if you're going to look at it from a 10,000 foot view as the CEO, almost all those tasks are staff type tasks, which means that we in sales wind with our staff hat on almost all day, every day. We're doing staff type duties. And so the problem with that is we start to think like we're staff. Well, what's the problem with that? Well, what is it? What is the reason why staff works for a company? Well, I tell people all the time, I give you a hint. It's rectangular, about this big, and it's made out of paper, and you typically get them on Fridays. They work for paychecks, right? And if you listen to people in real estate, I ask them when I teach all over the country, I say, hey, what is closing to you? Oh, getting paid, it being done, it being finished, the closing table, the finish line. These are the answers overwhelmingly that I get. And I said, that is actually evidence of the problem, because they're defining closing as some sort of finish line, as getting paid. And that is exactly what an employee would do. A CEO, I've been the CEO of several companies. I know often Friday comes around and I don't get paid. Friday comes around and I have to take money out of my pocket to put it in, because I'm not trying to get paid with this business today. I'm trying to build something that's going to pay me in the future. I'm trying to make something here. Right. And so as a CEO, I know that if I close somebody and that person would ever do business with any other agent again, as a CEO, I define that as failure.
Right.
I got paid to fail. And people, that's not the standard that exists in the industry. It's not the standard that exists in sales. Sales is all about this new marketing technique, this new way to manage leads, this new CRM, all these ways to try to squeeze more juice out of the front end side and completely neglecting the customer retention. We spend a fortune in brain power and in juice from our soul.
More.
Yeah, more, as opposed to, hey, look, I got these people that actually like, I don't even know why. I don't know what kind of brain damage these customers have, but for some reason they like me and they work with me already. Why wouldn't I talk to them?
Take care of them, right?
Yeah. Why don't we look after these folks? They've actually committed. These folks are the reason why my lights are on today. I owe them something.
Yeah. And we don't owe abusing them. We don't owe going to them to get another sale. We don't owe them like, oh, who can you refer me to so I can just get more and more and more. Like,
Amen.
we get that stuff when we service them, when we genuinely and authentically go to them and say, like, let me serve you right now. You are here. I am here because you are here. Let me see that, acknowledge that. And then people feel when it's genuine or they feel when it's not. And I think that this is a big thing for a lot of people in sales, because we come into sales to make money. That won't keep us in sales. And a lot of people need to hear this, right? Because what keeps you in sales is excellence in your service and in the quality of the work that you do, or it will spit you out. It will scrub you out of the system. So I love that you're saying this and that we're talking about this, because it's not talked about enough in sales, right? Most business, they'll have a sales department and then they'll have a customer service department. And I've always said, well, I think they're the same thing. If we could blend these two together and salespeople could see themselves as superior in customer service, imagine how great that business would be. So thank you for saying that. You talk about in your stuff that you teach to people, you teach something that's also equally important. And I found this interesting. This is how I knew that we would share similar philosophies. You teach people how to stop losing deals. And a lot of people, like we said before, they're just focused on more, how to get more. But what is it that you teach for your agents to make them understand that you also gain more by learning how to stop the bleeding, stop losing what it is that you currently have?
Well, I think that it starts with, and actually, maybe to take a half a step back, I was talking to my brother. My brother's a philosophy professor, and so I had written a book on how money works in the United States of America. And crazy as it sounds, I actually had to write a chapter in the book. Who would think in the United States of America I have to write a chapter in the book defending capitalism, right? And saying that, hey, look, it's a good system, right? And so I said to my brother, because the deep thinker, I said, help me with this. And he said, well, you know what? The first thing you have to do in a capitalist society to be successful, to get what you want, to sustain your life, is to figure out what the other person needs and how you can give it to them better than they can get it someplace else. It requires you to consider your brother or sister first. And that's the thing we get wrong in sales all the time. We miss who the customer is. We miss what their needs are. We miss what their motivation is. So when I go to an NAR study and I look at all the reasons why a customer uses agents, people love to look at a very peripheral level. Oh, they want help with negotiation. They want help with this. And so let me go take and see how I can convince them that I'm a good negotiator. As opposed to, I look at the list, the top 12 reasons they have are all fear-based motivations. So what I know about my customer is they're afraid. When I go talk to my customer, I know they're afraid. And my job is to show them, if you got me, you don't have to be afraid. And the other thing is, and this is a big thing in real estate, especially, my gosh, people act like, I say there's three things you need to close customers for life, and they act like the first one. And honestly, I got to tell you, Sabrina, in all the education stuff I took, they only told me about the first one anywhere that I went: rapport. Mm-hmm. If you develop rapport, you got to be vibing from the second you walk in the door. You got to get the vibe going, right? And the more and more that I think about this, the more irritated it makes me, because it's great if you can be friends with the customer. That's awesome. But why did the customer come to me? Did they come to me because they don't have friends? Or did they come to me because they have a real estate problem? Now, so what my position is, if they're coming to me because they have a real estate problem, which if you're looking to buy or sell real estate, the problem you have is you don't know how to do it. So you're coming to me to take and solve that problem. So maybe if I'm going to take and meet you where you're at, I should start by showing you that I'm capable of dealing with the issue you came to me with first. And then in the process of doing that, befriend you with the excellence with which I pursue that, right? So figuring out who the customer is and how to meet them there first is the first thing. The second thing, and in real estate, it's really bad, is credibility. Showing the customer that you actually know what you're talking about. I mean, so to give you an example, I was teaching the other day and I had about, maybe 60 agents in the room. And I said, who can tell me what the new CPI number, the Consumer Price Index number came out, the measure of inflation, what that was? No one could tell me. Could anybody tell me what the rate of unemployment is in the country? Could anybody tell me what wages did? For life? All the things that are the essential metrics to let you know whether or not the real estate market is one you should be in or out of. And a room full of folks that are marketing themselves as real estate professionals have no clue. And you know what, Sabrina? I have to give them a complete pass. You know why? Because no place other than one of my classes are they even told that's something they need to even be paying attention to. And it blows my mind. Because how can you be an advocate for your customer? How can you give them any kind of a suggestion if you have no idea of even the market that you're participating in? It makes no sense. Mm-hmm. So basically what we train agents to be is, you get a little notepad out, you get your pen. So how many bedrooms would you like that? Well, we're running a special. Would you like a half a side bath with that? I mean, go to IHOP for Pete's sake and be an order taker, because that's all they really are. And so those two things are huge, but the last one is probably the most important, and it has to deal with, and I'm sure in insurance, you guys get this as well, the perception that people have of folks that are in sales, right? It's not a positive perception. Oh, you're in sales. Half a step above saying you went to prison for something, almost, sort of.
Oh my.
Right. Well, I mean, if you look at the actual hierarchy, real estate agents are slightly better than used car salesmen and worse than attorneys on how they're perceived.
Wow.
So salespeople in general are always near the bottom of that list. So I know on the way in the door, I have to work my way out of a hole with the customer, with their perception of me. I have to show them, hey, this is what you think I'm going to be like, but I'm not. I'm something way over here. I'm way different than what you perceive.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I recognize on the way in that I'm in this hole and that what I say to them needs to convey that I'm something different, I'm much better suited to actually putting the customer in a position where they can be closed for life. And here's the reason why, I'm okay with that. I know for a fact the person most wanting to be closed for life is the customer. The customer desperately wants to not have to go interview more agents. They want to find something that's so good they never have to look again, because for them it's a pain in the butt. Who the hell likes to interview a whole bunch of people? And so based on that, it's the third thing that I need, which is the idea of trust, and not just any trust, the trust that that customer knows that if they call me and ask me, I will always tell them what the best thing for them to do is, regardless of whether it makes me money or not. And if my customer knows that, if they know that I'm looking out for them, they know I know my stuff and they like me, you know what the one thing they're not trying to do is replace me. And to me, that's how I close customers for life. That's the recipe.
I love this. I think that, you know, our real call when we come into a career is to make that career be better. What do I do to the industry that I'm a part of? Do I confirm everyone's stereotypes, or do I rise above and then make it be like a breath of fresh air that people are experiencing? And I think this happens a lot in all industries, especially in sales though, because we are that first level of interaction with the customer. And that's where you have to see, like, this is your opportunity to build your character, to build the way you want to be perceived, and then how the industry then perceives you. So I love that you say this. Do you, in your industry, have a lot of people that, jump from place to place and then they do bad deals? And then, do you deal with that also? This is very prevalent in the insurance industry, and it's very shameful. The only word that I could use to describe people that do this is shamefulness, because they don't innately care about the customer. All they care about is their income. And that's a sad place to be. And that's why the industry cannot keep you. It cannot afford to have someone with that. So, how do you deal with that in an industry where these people are pouring a lot of their money into a home? Are people selling properly, or do they just think like, how can I push them in another direction? How do you deal with that?
Well, the reality of it is I could go through the MLS and within 10 listings, pull out 8 and just find within those 8 things to me that are critical failures in how that property was listed. Now, in a market like we have today, if you can fog up a mirror, you can sell a home, because people are so desperate to buy homes that it's really not that big a deal. And like, if you were going to look for an attorney, right? You could tell pretty much by what that attorney charges how good they are, right? I mean, you could get hey, this guy's charging, $5,000 an hour. He must be amazing, or he's got everybody fooled. Well, in real estate, the thing is, we kind of all sort of charge around the same thing. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of tough to weed through, who are the bums and who are, for the consumer, I'm saying. Mm-hmm. For me, on my end, I'm usually blessed in the sense that the folks that show up to a class of mine are going to be the ones that want to be different, or they just desperately need continuing education hours for their license and they didn't realize what they were walking into. But one way or the other, they're getting the fire hose, right? One way or the other, we're going to take and we're going to hit them with these ideas that they've never heard before in their lives, and hopefully have them go out and cast a new vision for their business and do it in a different way. How do I deal with it? Honestly, it's a lot of patience on my end, because I can tell you, I mean, the horror stories of how bad it can be. I used to have, when we were in the short sale market there, 2009, 10, 11, 12, it would take a long time to sell a property. So I had like 74 active listings at the same time. I couldn't go out on a date with a girl without her knowing that all the showing instructions were on Show Us This, because I get 10, 12 phone calls and there's nothing I can do about it. I mean, I have the instructions there. It's all printed. It's in front of them. They can see it. They still call and ask the same stupid questions, right? And that's my industry. Like, you want to have hope for the industry, and every time they kind of let you down over and over and over again. So I have to sit here and say the customer's perception of agents is actually well earned. It's well deserved that they're thought of so poorly. And it's kind of what you're saying with the insurance industry as well, I guess, that there's enough bad players out there that the customer is right to be wary a little bit. And that's troubling because like, I know that's so far away from how I do my business. And yet I'm lumped in with all of those folks. Customers perceive me in that way. And so I don't want to be perceived that way. And that's part of the fuel I use to say, hey, look, please don't confuse me with those folks. You ran into something different here. And so I would say that there's a lot of people, I think probably in both industries, that are out there faking it till they make it, and are just throwing, they throw as much crap against the wall as they can. And rather than trying to figure out how to make the system better, they're just asking for bigger piles of crap so they have more stuff to throw against the wall. Give me more raw leads because that's how I'm going to make it work. And, there's a little saying that I keep taped to the bottom of my computer screen. I'm not a big sayings all over the place guy, but it says, societies grow rich when old men plant trees whose shade they know they'll never sit in. And the idea of just doing the right thing for the customer, because it's the right thing for the customer, because it makes the world a little bit of a better place, and I have to live in this world. It's my little contribution on a daily basis. It's not about what's in it for me. It's bigger than all of that. So for me, that's kind of how I try to, if that was the question, that's kind of how I try to keep the bubble in the middle.
Yeah. And it's really important because it changes our behavior. If we start thinking about, well, what am I leaving? What deposit am I making into the next generation? As opposed to how can I take as much as I possibly can? Okay, you're not 4 years old anymore. Okay. You are a 40, 50, 6-year-old grown man, or woman. How about you start thinking about what are you leaving behind? What impression are you leaving in this world? I love this. And I believe, this is what I wanted to also talk to you about today. Why is it more important today than ever before that we have to be better? We have to be working on ourselves. We can't just be like everyone else because everyone is so programmed, very typical. It's almost like when someone does something wrong, I'm like, okay, that's so normal. Why don't you, we are shocking people by going above and beyond. What systems do you put in place to make sure that you are constantly working on getting better and that your agents are getting better so that they can deliver more, go the extra mile for the customer instead of just being ordinary and doing what everyone else is doing?
Well, I mean, I think that it starts with embracing the big why, like the why you're doing what you're doing, that the idea that, so if to give you maybe the best example I can think of, in the founding documents of this country, we're guaranteed the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Mm-hmm. And if you actually look at how the founders would have defined the pursuit of happiness, because that happiness and what all that has changed over time, right? But their idea of the pursuit of happiness was the incredible joy and fulfillment one gets from a life well lived, from pursuing a life well lived. That is the greatest joy and fulfillment anyone can get. And folks have bought into this idea that unethical behavior is actually what is going to give them the most joy. If I can just take and make this money, I'm going to be able to spend it, and that's going to give me joy. And getting your head up, because one of the things I teach is ethics, and it's very much from the standpoint that you behaving ethically is actually, according to everything we know about human beings, the best way for a human being to live the best possible life for themselves, not for other people. It's actually what gives them the best contentment in life. So keeping that clearly in mind. And then honestly, for me, it's very much a discipline of having systems in place that reminds me to do all the things that I need to do. I know I'm the person that's going to forget everything. And so I have systems in place to make sure that I don't forget anything, because I know as a CEO of my company, memory is a problem. So I need to take and have systems in place. And so my method of advertising, my method of showing my customers I care, is 3 or 4 times a year. I call every single customer I have, and I hit them with this very complicated sales pitch. Hey, just was thinking about you. Hope you're doing okay. I just want to check in and see how you are. I don't ask for a sale. I don't ask for anybody I don't ask for a referral. I don't ask for anything. I let them know that they matter to me. And that's what I train all my agents to do. And it gets real easy when you actually realize that they should matter to you. And actually, when you make them matter to you, when you actually commit to the idea that, hey, look, these folks do matter. Maybe I didn't like them so much when I was working with them, whatever. But the reason why I have the life I have right now is because these folks took a shot on me. And I owe it to them to never forget that. And so for me in practice, that's what I do. And that's what I train agents to do. It's nothing, more complicated than that. The big ones for me is just like, again, back to my father. I remember going with him when maybe 3-4 years old to the movie theater. And so the first thing you do when you go inside the movie theater is you run up to the glass where the candy is, and you put your hands against the glass and you look at the candy, right? Because the closer you get to the candy, the closer it is to actually being in your mouth, I think. And so my father would always grab my hand. He'd say, no, son, don't touch the glass. If you touch the glass, somebody's got to clean it. And so my father always had this idea that the things that I do affect other people. And that was baked into the cake for me from a little, like, you never let the door go without looking behind you to make sure it's not going to close on somebody, and getting out of the selfish mindset. My father was also born in 1930. So, he lived through the Great Depression. He was an old man when I came along, so he's telling me this very different way of looking at everything than people do today. And so it gave me, the kind of this dissonance that I'm always seeing between what I heard as a kid and how I see people live. And one of the things that gets me is, in addition to being the loneliest generation of Americans that has ever existed, this is also the most depressed generation of Americans that's ever existed. And so if my customer and the agents I'm talking to, don't let them know, are lonely and depressed, what's the best thing I could possibly do for them except reach out and let them know that I care and that I'm there and that they matter to me? And one of the cool things about that, Sabrina, if you're looking for a market opportunity, nobody else is doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else is doing it. If you want to stand out in your market, it's as simple as picking up the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I tell agents to do it, 1 out of every 10 do it. And consistently, that 1 out of 10 is always winds up being a top producer.
Yeah. And I do believe that, when you do run a business, you have a responsibility to teach this and to enforce it, because it's almost like the standards we place on them is what they become. And so it's like, reward just great customer service, like talk about it more, engage with that whole idea and concept more than just like a new sale. And I think that, this is something I'm always reinforcing to myself to make sure I'm aware of what am I pushing or pressing on the field force. So I love that you're talking about this, in dealing with the world that we're living in today. I know that you do something very unique where you've blended cryptocurrency with real estate. This is something that, especially for me, I'm in this old conservative world of insurance. And, we look at it like money. There's one type of money. Would you just for me also to understand, what is the benefit of cryptocurrency today? How have you, intertwine this into your industry to make people understand it, and then to use it as a benefit for them to grow also?
So I am probably right there with you for the most part where this was. In fact, 1.5 years, 2 years ago, I knew nothing about it. And I was actually on a different podcast with my broker. And he's like, by the way, everybody that's listening, I'm going to this crypto conference this week. And on right there on the podcast, he says Cadillac, because he always calls me by my last name, because I think he forgot my first name years ago and he just kept calling me Cadillac. It's a Cadillac. You should go. I was like, okay. He said, you should write a class on crypto. I'm like, well, wait a second here. To write a class on something, I actually have to know what I'm talking about. Not going to happen. He says, don't worry. I got some people that are big players in the space. They'll help you out. So that's actually how I got started. I knew nothing. I'm like, who's going to buy a Bitcoin? It's $43,000. If I have $42,000, I can't afford one. How does this work? But as it turns out, there's a lot to know about it. But in general, especially in a world like we have today, right? If you look at what's happening to the US dollar, we've just come out of the lowest period of inflation ever in the history of this country. From the 90s all the way to 2019, we had this beautiful low inflation that was going on. So nobody has any clue what a high inflation market looks like, unless you've been in real estate for 40 or 50 years. And even then, it's so long ago, you're going to need a memory pill to remember exactly how it went down. Right now, the CPI number came out last month. It was 8.5, which means your dollar, based on that, buys 91 and a half cents worth of stuff. From last year to this year, it only buys 91 and a half cents worth of stuff. Now, here's the problem with CPI. CPI is a number that politicians favor. So if the politicians like the number, we have to figure something must be wrong with it. And there is. Most economists agree it is a weak measure of inflation. It's overweighted to technology. Technology tends to come down in price with time. So that DVD player that cost $1,200 in 1990 costs $67 today, and it's going to make it look like there's less inflation, right? So the number that I typically prefer to look at, just as a minimum gauge of what inflation is at, is the producer price index. So 2 days after CPI comes out, producer price index comes out, it was 11.2 this past month. Your dollar can buy about 88 and a half cents worth of stuff, 88 and a half cents worth of stuff from last year to this year. Now, I say all that because what we're looking at with cryptocurrency is a different method of payment than the money that we typically use. And the reason why cryptocurrency was originally, why Satoshi Nakamoto came out with Bitcoin, was in a response to what the federal government did to bail out the banks in the housing crisis. He's like, hey, look, this is just such a corrupt system. We need something that is decentralized, that no government controls. And one of the things that's cool about this idea of no government controlling it, being the word they use is decentralized all over the places, you could blow up America tomorrow and Bitcoin would still be there. And it would still function as if nothing happened. Now, if you were to go up to 3 or 4 locations around this country and blow up American Express, they would cease to be, because all that information is only in those 3 or 4 locations. It's redundant, but the redundancy within cryptocurrency is much, much more. The benefit of it in general is it allows you another place to pull your money out of. So like for me, I recognize that when I'm asking somebody to buy real estate, I'm saying, hey, look, I want you to take a short position in cash and a long position in real estate. I want you to shorten your cash position, lengthen your position in real estate. All right. So cash last year went down 11.2% in value. Real estate went up in my market about 24%. That's a 35-point differential. Anybody wake up in the morning to make 35 points in their money? I think so. It's a pretty good play. Bitcoin is another alternative to this, but it has the benefits, similar benefits to money. Unlike real estate's not liquid. With Bitcoin, you can easily transact with it, and more so it's becoming so. So the thing that makes a good money, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of taking a long route to answer the question, but I'm trying to give you the foundational stuff to understand where I'm going. What makes a good money is a thing called a stock to flow ratio. All right. So gold has been historically, through the history of the world, like the best thing we found as a long-term store of wealth, the best type of money in general. It's the reason why so many countries are on the gold standard for a long time. The US in the 70s completely exited the gold standard. And at that point, our money was backed by nothing but fiat, which is basically means because I said so. Mm-hmm. The dollar is worth $1 because the government says it's worth $1. That's it. And we all kind of agree it's worth $1, but that buys 88 cents worth of stuff now. So how are we feeling about that? Anyway, the reason why gold works so well is because gold, the ability to mine more gold is very limited. Even with all the technology, everything we have, we can only add so much gold to the existing stock of gold that there is in the world today. And the amount of gold we have, because gold has so few industrial uses, is basically all the gold we've ever mined, minus whatever we've lost, like in buried treasure and sunken ships. But otherwise, we still got all the gold. It's in jewelry or wherever it is, but we still got it all. So it's this massive supply and this massive stock and this limited flow of gold that we can mine each year that's getting added to it. So it's very difficult to inflate. Mm-hmm. That's what has always made gold such a good long-term store of wealth. And the fact that everybody agrees that it's got value, because what makes gold valuable? Only the fact that we all agree it's valuable. Otherwise, it's a hunk of metal, right? Kind of the same thing where we are with dollars. What makes dollars valuable? We all kind of agree that they're worth something. So I guess it's still worth something. Well, with Bitcoin, unlike gold, Bitcoin actually has a negative stock to flow ratio. What do I mean? There's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin ever. That's it. And so if the demand for Bitcoin continues to increase, then theoretically the price is going to have to increase because there's no ability for the supply side to add more supply to dilute the value. That's what happened to the US dollar, right? In the last, from 2019, in 2019, we had a $4 trillion supply of US dollars. Today, we have a $20 trillion supply of US dollars. The number of dollars increased by 5 times in the last 2.5 years.
I have a question for you. So if they keep the Bitcoin at 21 million, does the ability to create other forms of cryptocurrency then negatively impact the value of a Bitcoin? So like if they're making all these different forms of crypto, is that their way to kind of devalue it?
It's like saying, does the fact that the euro exists devalue the dollar?
Okay, gotcha. It's a
Right?
different currency altogether.
It's a different currency altogether, and it's a different network, and it has different properties. So there's built-in problems that Bitcoin has. But one of the interesting things, and people don't know this, the third largest currency by value in the world today is Bitcoin, only behind the dollar and the euro.
Mhm.
That's it. By actual, value of what it's worth. And the other thing that people don't realize, I think, is that Bitcoin has never been hacked. Like, there have been exchanges that have been hacked. There have been bad players in those spaces, but the actual blockchain, there has never been fraud committed on the actual Bitcoin blockchain. And the system that it uses, while it's, not environmentally friendly because it uses so much electricity and whatever the issues that exist with it, it has been the proof case that a non-government issued currency can be accepted worldwide. I mean, here's the crazy thing, right? There was a gal that I used to date. Her dad was a chemical executive in Venezuela. Guy worked for like 50 years, worked like a dog, spoke German, Spanish, and English. Super cool, humble, great guy. Did well for himself, had a boat, had a couple of houses. Then Chavez. Their inflation this year is 300%.
Wow.
He lives in Colombia. He's struggling to survive in his late 70s and early 80s because of inflation, he has been completely robbed of everything he worked his entire life for. And because of limitations and things like, oh, you can only bring $10,000 in, you can't leave the country with this much money, he could literally go to an exchange and have exchanged all of his money from Venezuela for Bitcoin, hopped in a plane and taken his entire wealth with him, and had to ask no one any questions. It's not like strapping gold coins to your legs.
Right.
It's a very, very different thing. You're a Ukrainian refugee with millions of dollars and you're trying to escape the Russians. If you can just remember your seed phrases in your head, no one has the ability to rob you of your money. And so those pieces of what this is, like everything, every investment has properties, right? So real estate versus the stock market. Those properties have to be looked at individually and see how they compare. This is how I compare an office building to a strip mall, right? I have to take a look at the different properties and make them as alike as I can. When I stack up the properties of gold and I stack up the properties of Bitcoin alongside of each other than making pretty jewelry and tangibility, Bitcoin seems to come out ahead. That tangibility portion of this gold, though, is actually one of its negatives as well, because people can steal a tangible asset from me pretty easily if they see that I have it. But if it's an intangible asset that's kept offline someplace, if I have my seed phrases and I'm not in a position to be hacked, I am actually much more secure than that person that's holding a bunch of gold is. And so the issue with Bitcoin really is its limited ability to handle massive amounts of transactions. So like at peak capacity, it can handle like 1/1000th, let's say. That's not the right number, but it's for scope wise, it makes sense of what, let's say, Visa does in a day. It just can't handle that kind of volume. And so there's things that they're trying to take and do to fix that. As it stands right now, El Salvador, Bitcoin is legal tender in El Salvador. If you're a vendor, you must accept 2 things, the US dollar and Bitcoin. And every El Salvadorian citizen has a cryptocurrency wallet, and the government gave them a little bit of Bitcoin to start out with. And I believe it's 1/3 of the population of El Salvador transacts in Bitcoin every week at a minimum. And so as far as a good long-term store of wealth for things like real estate, it makes a lot of sense, because like if you had gold Cougarans in the safe and you were going to buy a house, you might consider liquidating your Cougarans to go buy a house. You're not going to liquidate your Cougarans to go shopping at the store, right? It's a different kind. The scope of transaction is different. You might consider liquidating some other investment type to go into a real estate investment type, right? But you're not going to do it for consumption typically. And so I think that the niche that Bitcoin fills is that notch of long-term store of wealth, of true investment. And so for that reason, I see it as a good player in the real estate space. Plus, with the things that exist in DeFi, decentralized finance now, which is another offshoot of the Ethereum blockchain, smart contracts, and all these other things that have come with these newer coins, there's the ability to borrow against your crypto without ever selling it. So for me in real estate, I'm always looking to take and avoid taxes. Why? Because while I love America, I love everything about America, my silent partner, Uncle Sam, is always there when I make money to get his taste and never there when I lose money to take and kick something in, right? He's like the worst silent partner ever, right? And so I don't want to pay taxes if I can avoid it. In real estate, I do this all the time because if I sell a piece of real estate, I'll either do a 1031 exchange, which allows me to kick the can and avoid taxes, and then swap it for another piece of property. Or the other way for me to realize my appreciation is to refinance and borrow against that appreciation that I've taken and use that money to go now buy more real estate. In cryptocurrency, you were kind of locked in, kind of like you are with stocks. Hey, look, if I make money in my stocks, I have to sell some in order to take and recognize any of that gain. But as soon as I do, I create a taxable event. Well, if you have the ability now to borrow against your cryptocurrency, which exists, and at some fairly favorable rates, the ratio is not great, but at pretty favorable rates. When you borrow that money, that's not a taxable event. So you're actually, I bought this, a million of these coins at 1/10 of 1 cent, and now they're, $1 a piece. Well, if I can go pledge that someplace and borrow against it, I now just, gave myself access to 25 million bucks. I can go buy an income producing property. That income producing property now generates income, which most crypto millionaires don't have because they don't have a job. They're sitting there trading crypto all day. They have no income to show, so they can't qualify for a mortgage. You go out and buy an income producing property. That property is producing income, which now counts as income for you on your tax returns to show, guess what? You're back in the mainstream. You qualify for regular home mortgages. There's all sorts of things that you can do. It's a very sexy area for me. And the other one that's kind of near and dear to my heart with it is the idea of tokenization, the idea of fractionalizing ownership. And so, let's say in the old days, you and I, Sabrina, we want to go buy an investment property. We're looking at this, $5 million investment property. We're each going to put some money in. We realize maybe we want to get a couple of other investors in because we don't want to put in $2.5 million a piece or whatever. So we got 5 of us in the group. So now we do this. We have to sign a partnership agreement. We have to all come to terms. Hey, look, if you want to sell your piece, you got to offer it to us. We got to get an appraisal for market value, whatever. And even so, we're looking at, even if we're borrowing money to buy it, everybody's coming up with $250,000, $300,000 a piece in cash to take and make this deal happen, at least. Well, with fractionalized ownership, we can take and equalize the playing field a lot. The biggest issue with investing in real estate has always been the threshold to entry of cost. Right? It costs a lot of money. Even if you want to buy a cheap little house, you're going to have $25,000, $30,000 in cash for them to give you enough of a loan to buy the house. Right? That's a lot of money for most people. And the thing that bothers me, and the reason why I even wrote my book, was because people in America just don't know how money works. They don't know how to invest. And so having when they actually survey the poor and ask them what the number one tool they use for investment is today, the answer is overwhelmingly lottery tickets.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, no, look, I had the benefit of going back to college when I was in my 30s, right? And so I go to college and I'm listening to all these professors and they got all these great ideas. You know how professors are. They all have these amazing ideas and they're all brilliant and they all know everything in the world, except one thing. Not one of them had any clue. They had no clue how money worked. I walked out of college with 4 of my college professors and investors in my fund because they had no clue what to do with their money, right? And so I said, wait a second, this is a huge problem. So then I found out this thing about lottery tickets. There's no place in mainstream education where we teach people how money works. We'll give them a $150,000 loan to go take a college degree, but how to actually pay that back, no clue. So getting people into the idea and understanding that the investor class in this country has overwhelmingly always outperformed the working class, every other class, the investor class has always done well. Mm-hmm. So how do we get people to buy into this idea? Well, when I go and I volunteer to school to teach how money works, what they do to reward the students that give the most interaction is they give me a $25 Target gift card. And I'm sitting here and it crushes a little piece of my soul. I'm sitting here, let me give somebody something to reward them by more consumption. Yes, here's a way to go spend more money, right? The idea of tokenization, we could take $1 million property or a $5 million property, and rather than having 5 partners, we could make 5 million tokens, and each token's value be $1. Now, instead of a $25 gift card, I can give them $25 in an appreciating asset that's generating cash flow. Instead of a baby being born and a parent's giving them a $500 bond, like happened with years ago, they give them $500 in an appreciating asset that's throwing off cash flow. That threshold to entry is gone, completely equalizes the playing field for folks at any level to start investing. You don't need big money. You can get in there with little money in something that's secure, that has a stable market. Because the real estate market is a fairly stable. I mean, it's an appreciating market, but over time, it's fairly stable. And so to me, getting kids at a young age, hey, you know what? I'm not going to give you $5. Here's $5 in an asset that it's appreciating. You cut the lawn, here you go. This is going to be worth something for you. This actually matters. Getting them hungry, get that appetite built up early on, man. You can really change people's lives. The earlier they start, the better it is. So
I think this is so profound. I think that for a lot of us, just hearing these conversations, and this is why I love doing the podcast, because it's not about just doing the same thing that's always been done, but it is about learning and really just changing our behaviors. And it's the hardest thing to do. That's why people prefer to just keep doing what they've always done. And that's a sad, sad way to live.
Most people go through I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Sabrina, but most people go through their lives as passengers in the passenger seat of their own life. They want to blame everybody else for what's going on with them. And, there's a line that somebody dropped. I mean, it's not particularly kind, but it says, losers blame others, winners blame themselves. And I found there's a lot of equity in that, in the sense that, hey, look, maybe it is somebody else's fault, but you know what? I can't change them. I can do something about this, though. This is something I can work on. And when you get it in your head, and I think this is in line with what you talk about, that the biggest stumbling block to your success is that person looking back at you in the mirror every single day. That person gets in your way more than anybody else ever has or ever will. When you get your head really around that, that's where change really comes from. That's when you can really start to make some hay and get some stuff to happen. Be willing to throw all the garbage that you're carrying forward on the altar, burn it off, and let's find the good and really, really expound on that. Yeah,
this is powerful stuff. And I love that, just to tie this all in together, like it starts with us. Like, it's not the industry that you're part of. It's not your career. It's not the economy. It is you. Cause there's a lot of people making a lot of money right now, inflation or no inflation. It's how we approach the situation. I just want to say thank you for your time today. I think just for people, if they want to learn more, if they want to, find you, where can they go to learn more so that they can grow more and then, expand what they have in front of them in terms of opportunities?
Well, thank you, Sabrina. And it was great being on here. acecloser.com is where my website is, where you can see where I'm teaching it and what's going on. I also have a podcast as well called Know Your Shit. Well, actually it's SH*T.
Love it.
Just cutting through all the nonsense and really just knowing what you're talking about, as opposed to faking it till you make it. It's got to stop. That's where it's at.
Thank you. It was a breath of fresh air today. Thank you so much. Thank you, standalone community. Let's do this. Let's become extraordinary. That's the whole point. Thank you.